If you're a painting contractor in the US, chances are you use QuickBooks. And you might also use Airtable. Our clients at Boolean, we highly recommend using Airtable. And since QuickBooks is the most common accounting software out there, we've built an integration with Airtable and QuickBooks to allow your office staff and your people in the field to actually generate invoices quickly, show invoices to customers live so that they can do more without the back office and the accounting or bookkeeper getting involved. This is all one integration. That's an Airtable QuickBooks integration. It pulls expenses from Sherwin-Williams into QuickBooks and then allows you to take all those bills and log them in Airtable so that you can do job costing in Airtable. And this is cutting down our clients' job costing time from sometimes a week to the day the job finishes. As soon as those invoices from Sherwin hit the account, we can show you those costs inside of Airtable. So if that's of interest, this is me just explaining how the setup works, what it's all, the mapping of the jobs and projects and QuickBooks and the customers and sub-customers. This is just a high-level overview of what data we're pulling from QuickBooks and how that comes into Airtable. So hopefully this is valuable to you if you fall into that bucket. And without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so I'm going to walk through how we manage all of the data between Airtable and QuickBooks. First of all, in Airtable, we have a job, and then that job has child projects underneath it. And the reason for that is because oftentimes you'll have one contract with the customer, which is what represents that job, but you split it into multiple projects, whether because it's a project type that is just job costed differently. Maybe you're subbing out a portion of the job. So you'd want to indicate that we're going to have the subcontractor do the carpentry, whereas the in-house will do the interior painting, for example. But jobs are the parent and projects are the child in Airtable. How that converts over to QuickBooks is that every job and project gets its own customer, and then we nest those or create sub-customers to match our parent-child relationship in Airtable. So every job gets a parent customer and every project gets a sub-customer. The reason that that's important is because of the data that we're syncing back and forth between QuickBooks and Airtable. And so what we do is every single invoice and payment is always getting logged to the parent customer. Again, because this is the contract, that parent customer represents the job itself. So the parent customer has an invoice, and then the payments get attributed to those parent customers, whereas the sub-customers are where all of the expenses and bills go. And the reason for that is because you oftentimes, if you're going to split a job into multiple projects, you want to know what was our profitability of the project versus the profitability of the overall job. So if you do split it and you're looking at carpentry or whatnot, you want to know, how did we do on the carpentry portion? Did we overbid or underbid that or whatnot? Same thing for if it's interior, exterior, the same logic applies there. When it comes to all the data inside of QuickBooks, like I said, the money, the invoices and payments, that's all the parent customer tied to the job. The expenses, the bills, the vendor credits, those are all attributed to, well, by default, obviously, QuickBooks doesn't know what customer does this bill go to. But when you assign a bill or an expense or a vendor credit in QuickBooks to a sub-customer, then we import those expenses, bills, and vendor credits into Airtable, and we associate all of those to the correct project. And again, that's so that you can job cost. Then the last piece here is QuickBooks time. So all of the hours that are logged to a given project, we want to make sure they are logged to a given project, I should say. Whereas as opposed to some companies that will just have one job code for the overall job, you need to know how many hours were worked on which projects of the job. So this is just an overview or a map. I'll zoom out here. So if you wanted to take a screenshot of this, this is the rough mapping of how all the data works together. But simply put would be money is the parent, the expenses or cost and time all gets attributed to the sub-customer, which is the project and job. Now, if I dive into our actual Airtable base, what we're doing inside of Airtable is we import all invoices from QuickBooks. So every single invoice that exists inside of QuickBooks, we pull into Airtable. And because invoices can have one or many lines on them, there's also an invoice lines table. And so every single line item gets stored in a database of line items and then attributed to the correct invoice. If I group this by invoice, for example, we have a bunch of line items that are not assigned to an invoice yet. But you can see here, like this is an invoice for Shelly that has 2 line items on it. So one of the line items is for interior. One of them is for a deposit that they paid previously. So that's just an example. Customer transactions, we also import all customer transactions into Airtable as well. And again, because a transaction would be a payment, so all payments, as we said before, get attributed or assigned to the parent customer, which is linked to the job. Expenses, we pull in all expenses, bills, and vendor credits into this expenses table, because from a job costing perspective, all of those things are cost to the job. And we do pull in all expenses. So it's not just, obviously only COGS get assigned to projects, but every single expense inside of QuickBooks is pulled in here. And then we would go in and mark supplies and materials. That account inside of QuickBooks is material expense for the sake of job costing in Airtable. Last thing, I think from a QuickBooks side of things, is we import all class data from QuickBooks, all of your items, the names, and this allows us, so when we're making invoices in Airtable, we can attribute or like assign this line item is a customer deposit item inside of QuickBooks. So when we push the data into QuickBooks, we can select the correct item, which is another name in QuickBooks for items is services. And then we also extract out all of the accounts from QuickBooks so that we have just basically every single account that is in your chart of accounts exists in here. And that again is so like on expenses, when we import an expense, we need to know which account was this expense tied to inside of your QuickBooks. And then the very last thing is vendors. So we also will pull out vendor credit or vendors from QuickBooks and store them here. And that's so that we can track for subcontractor payments. They're listed as vendors inside of QuickBooks, and we want to be able to easily generate bills that we have to pay those subcontractors inside of QuickBooks. That is an overview of our QuickBooks integration. And I think that should answer most questions that anyone has related to that.